Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome once more to the main object Big Book study of Alcoholics Anonymous. I am an alcoholic. My name is David. It's again tremendous blessing to be here with all of you, and I've asked our friend Nancy to read the AA preamble, get us started. There we go.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Nancy. I'm an alcoholic. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help other alcoholics to recover. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. Thank you.
Nancy, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And now, could we say the Serenity Prayer? So, touching base with our higher power. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So, welcome everybody this morning. And as you, I think you all know, but if some of you are new, I'll touch base quickly. We are a line by line big book meeting, which means we go through the book very slowly. The purpose of doing that is really to do two things: to first unlock the text for us and bring it to life in a way that well, let me put it this way. I want you to experience a little bit of this sort of awe and wonder that I did when I went to my first line by line big book study. That really, like, this book had been sitting in front of me for literally for decades, and and I read it and I knew it and I could recite it, but I didn't really understand what they were trying to say, and I didn't realize that until it was some of the deeper meanings were pointed out. And so I want to convey that to you. And then doing that, the second thing is really turning this into a tool for sharing the program with other people. And so one of the ways we do that is, and I'll mention this again. Hello. Oh, hi there. Um, sorry,
That was me,
I
David. I
keep getting
apologize.
muted. Okay, there we go. Um, so one of the ways we do that is um, we categorize. Thanks. I got lost my place. We categorize the text into five categories, and so and that really helps break it down. And so, and you can see right there that's questions, directions, and explanations, promises, warnings, and history. And so, what we will do is, as we go along, and the colors are highlighter colors that I use, and so what we will do as we go along is we'll categorize the text. Sorry. So anyway, the format is that we will I'll do my thing until about 7 o'clock, and then at that point we'll open it up for discussion. The meeting's recorded, so we can post it on our YouTube channel, although only my part is recorded, so you don't have to worry about your comments getting out there for the world and that kind of thing. So that said, we are on page 59. We've started the chapter How It Works, and now we're really getting to basically the 12 steps and a little before, just a few words before that. Now, we are not going to cover a lot of ground today page-wise, but what we are covering is there's a lot to go through here. So I don't know if we'll get through all 12 steps. I'm not going to, go in depth for every step. But what I am going to do is give you all a little bit of the background, and which I think is pretty amazing, just how they were written, and then what I'm going to do is, like I like to do, is some of the terminology, some of the words, at least for me, some of the words that I took for granted that I thought I knew. Well, I know what that means. I know what abandoned or unmanageable means. I mean, I've been to school. I understand these things. What I realize is when I first I went to the 1939 dictionary and tried to get into Bill's mind and what he was thinking and why he chose those particular terms. And again, when I did that, it sort of opened it up in a way that made it come alive for me. So just to give some background, okay, so what we're talking about here, this part of the book, I'm going to share with you just some thoughts on this. It was December of 1938, and at that point, Bill Wilson, he was not doing well. He was sober, of course, and he was quite busy leading the still unnamed fellowship, and it was helping a lot of other people stay sober. There were nearly 100 people at this point. But for Bill, the stress of building the society, along with, see, Bill was under constant scrutiny, and everybody. You may find this really startling, but the other people who were coming in suddenly had their own opinions about how things should be done. And and a lot of people weren't quiet about letting Bill know that. And that dynamic even ramped up even further because now Bill was in the midst of writing the big book. And so what he would do is he would write during the day, and then he would go to the meeting at night and he would read what he wrote for the purpose of getting feedback. And he got a lot of it. And some of it he didn't like. But anyway, so the constant scrutiny was really taking its toll. And he was at a point in December of 1938 where he faced what was perhaps his greatest challenge. And that was the writing of, he was writing the primary text. But at the close of 1938, he saw that even though he had written 4 chapters and the doctor's opinion, something was really missing. He was haunted by this feeling that something important to the writing just wasn't there, but he couldn't quite figure out what it was. And then it dawned on him. Looking at what he had written so far, he realized that what the book needed was not more detail or explanation or insight. It needed quite the opposite. It needed a concise summary. He had all these ideas floating out there, and he felt like what we don't have is I'm going to use this word. I don't know if Bill ever used this word. Like a compact manifesto. Like, here's what we're about. Here's what we do. And so the problem was, at this point, he was exhausted. He was totally uninspired. He didn't feel like writing anymore. He didn't want to be writing anymore. and he was sick over the responsibility. So he used to get these what he called imaginary ulcer attacks, and so he had one of his imaginary ulcer attacks, and he went home, and Lois told him, "Listen, why don't you just go to sleep?" And so, but he said, "No, I got to write this other thing." So he goes up to his bedroom, and he takes a yellow legal pad and a pencil, and he prays for guidance. And what happened then is that as soon as he prayed for guidance, the words started to just flow out of him. And he recalled the 6 principles that he and Dr. Bob had gotten from the Oxford group. And Bill quickly saw, as he's writing out these 6 principles, he's seeing that he needs to expand on them a bit. Not radically, but he really needs to enlarge upon them because he needed to eliminate any loopholes, potential loopholes, that a still resistant alcoholic could run to. So, in the space of the next 30 minutes, Bill completed his writing. And when he was done, he was amazed, he was astonished, and he looked at what he had written. He counted it up and put a title at the top. And what he wrote at the top was the 12 steps. And that is how it happened. And it really did. In 30 minutes, boom, there it was. And so anyway, I'm going to touch upon that. And we are starting on page 59, like I said. And we're going to start with a warning. And that warning is half measures availed us nothing. So obviously he's laid out some principles at this point, but he's really saying at this point we have to abandon ourselves completely. And he enlarges upon that with direction. The rest of actually is pretty much everything from this point forward, just to make it simple. As I went through the steps and prepping for this morning, I thought, well, okay, within this step or that step, is this a warning? Is this direction? I figured hold it. The 12 steps are our basic direction. So it's all, except for that first part, half measures availed us nothing. Everything we're going to read today is all in green. So Donna, I'm so glad you got a new green highlighter. So, and that just keeps it simple because these are our basic directions. So half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. And I looked up the word abandon. I sort of, we all know what abandon means, but the definition really drove it home to me, and that is to give up all claim to. So think about it. It is what he's saying is we stood at this turning, half measures availed us nothing. We stood at this turning point. And what's the turning point? The turning point isn't necessarily just drunk or sober. For those of us who have been sober a while, I think you can testify. For me anyway, have been numerous turning points, literally, where it's, I can be sober and miserable, or give all of myself over to this. And the longer, I don't know about anybody else, but the longer I've been here, the more I realize It's not that it wasn't there before, but there were things about myself I never considered giving to AA that I realized I had to give to AA. So I was giving every single thing about myself. And so I asked his protection and care with complete abandon. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. And the first step: one, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. I knew from the first time I heard step one that I was powerless over alcohol. I knew that I couldn't stop drinking, and I knew that when I did drink, I could not control my behavior. I knew that. And so before the end of my first meeting, I grasped and I understood what powerlessness was. And then it took me several decades to really grasp what unmanageability meant. Because I just thought unmanageability meant chaos. But what unmanageability means, and this is, I went to the definition in the dictionary of several things, of because there's a definition of unmanageable, but it just says not manageable, so that doesn't really help. So the definition of unmanageable is beyond one's ability to effectively oversee and control. So already with step one, what we've seen is we need to abandon ourselves, and we need to admit that we cannot effectively oversee or control our lives. And here's where that becomes tricky, or it's been tricky for me. What I also recognized is that means I can't effectively oversee and control my own efforts to stay sober, right? Because and what I did was I had an agenda for my life. Alcohol, as I saw it, was depriving me of that agenda, of that ability to do certain things. So I would come into AA and I would use the tools and the program and the fellowship to get back on track with my agenda. So there were a couple problems with that. First, it was my agenda for my life. That was a problem. And second, I was directing the pursuit of my agenda and the application of Alcoholics Anonymous. So if I'm the problem, I'm still staying in the problem, even though I'm now calling it sober and I know all the lingo, so I sound like one of you. So from there, we go on to step two. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Now, there's that word saying. We have seen something similar to this already. If you remember, if we jump back a little bit, this notion of sanity, excuse me. If we jump back to page, all the way back to page 5, just briefly, or, you don't have to. At the bottom of page 5, Bill's talking about he now has self-knowledge. And self-knowledge is going to keep him sober. Yet he ended up drunk. And he's saying, where had been my high resolve. I simply didn't know. It hadn't even come to mind. Someone had pushed a drink my way and I had taken it. Was I crazy? So there's the notion of sanity, insanity. I began to wonder, for such an appalling lack of perspective seemed near being just that. So if we look, so Bill has something in mind when he says sanity. And I believe what he has in mind, and this is the definition I wrote out for it. Sanity is the capacity, the ability to consistently and accurately link actions to consequences. Because what's Bill talking about there? Bill, on page 5, he's saying, I have this self-knowledge. I know why I drink. I know what will happen when I drink. I don't want any of that. Yet I drink. And that's that inability to recognize that if I take this drink, here's what's going to happen. And I've heard it said, people say, I think I'll do the same thing and get different results. I don't know about anybody else, gang. When I drank, the notion of a result of something happening from my drinking didn't happen. I just had a drink in me and suddenly I had no idea how it got there. But moving on, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. Now remember, in step 2, what we're realizing is, first of all, we cannot connect, well, this is part of step 1 actually. We cannot connect actions and consequences. But we have come to believe that a power greater than ourselves can allow us to connect action to consequence. And in step 3, we are making a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. And then moving on, and we'll get a little later on, I'll go into the what it says for us, what the book says to us about what step 3 really means and what happens after that. So I won't focus on that now. Step 4, we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. So we really, as it says elsewhere in our literature, we really take stock. Because what Bill is really laying out there, again, these 12 steps are a spiritual program of action. And we've already established in step 2 that we do believe that only God can keep us sane and sober. So the rest of the steps are really focused on establishing and maintaining that relationship with God, which I thought when I came in, I thought, okay, I need to have a relationship with God. Okay, I'll do that. Okay, God, how you doing? And but what I did not realize, what I failed to realize, was how blocked by self-will I actually was. And so what the steps really did was, there are parts of the steps where I reach out to God, but the real heavy lifting in the steps for me has been unburdening myself of the things that block me from God. And very often they're things that I'm either quite unaware of or quite comfortable holding on to. And part of that is the moral inventory. And then in step 5, admit it to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. One of the things that I did that I found helpful, and it's not in the literature except for this part right here where it says the exact nature of our wrongs. And what I felt the need to do was really take that literally. And so when I finished my 5th step with my sponsor, I went back and I reviewed it and I looked at everything that I had listed in all those pages. And I asked myself a simple question. Is there a common thread that runs through every item in this inventory? Is there a common theme? Is there a common pattern? And I really boiled it down. Now, not everybody will want to do this. Not everybody needs to do this. But I did. And because I felt that's what it meant for me when I read the exact nature of my wrongs. And I found something. I really did. And not only did I find something, but I found something that I still at times acted out on. And wasn't that interesting? Because I found that to be the exact nature of my wrongs. And I think it's going to be a different process for everybody, but I really took that literally. We're now, step 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And what are we talking about with defects of character? We're talking about a basic flaw in our moral foundation. See, and that's Bill's main, I guess you would say, thesis here, is that at some point along the line, there developed a basic flaw in our moral foundation. And as a result of that basic flaw led us to abandon a working relationship with a higher power. And the pain and discomfort and frustration of that lack of a relationship could only be quieted by one thing, and that was temporarily, and that was intoxication through alcohol. That is the whole premise he's working on here. So, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. Step 7. And with humbly, this is, and you hear a lot of definitions about humbly. And in all fairness, when I went to the dictionary, there were 5 or 6 different definitions, but this was the one that I zeroed in on, and that is submitting to an authority outside oneself. Because you'll hear things like, it's not thinking less of myself, it's thinking of myself less. And I think, okay, I'm not going to dispute that. But what I needed to do was I needed to get down, when thinking about humility, I needed to get down to the real basics underneath the surface. Because it's not about how I think of myself or I don't think of myself. It is my relationship to authority, and that specifically the authority of a higher power, and the role I submit to for that higher power's dominance in my life or guidance of my life. So, And what that means in step 7 is that, see, I've learned this process of eliminating character defects. But in step 7, it's asking me to seek the removal of those character defects that prevent the authority of God working in my life. And then I made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. And again, looking at the definition of amends, interestingly, it said nothing about apologies or seeking forgiveness. What it did say is actions intended to correct damage. And I heard a speaker once say that if I have an accident with my car and that car crashes into the fence and I need to amend that fence, I fix the fence. I take actions to fix the fence. I don't tell the fence how sorry I am. That may be part of it. But what I'm doing is I'm getting out nails, hammer, wood, and I'm fixing the fence I damaged. 9. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. I understand, and I'm not going to dispute this, there are such a thing as indirect amends or living amends, okay? For our purposes today and for what we're reading here, that is outside. It might be similar, it might be related, but it's really outside the scope of what they're talking about here in step 9. They're talking about direct amends, which is discussing the wrong that was done or taking action based on the wrong that was done and doing things in order to correct that damage. Continued on step 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. And then in 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. I've shared this before, but one of the things that I think is important because I struggled, like I think a lot of people have, with this notion of meditation. And I think it's interesting when you go back to the dictionary, the 39 dictionary, and look up meditation, because it wasn't until the 19 see, when we think of meditation today, we think of we a lot of us bring an Eastern mindset to it. We think of sitting cross-legged and reaching some higher spiritual state. See, whether that's true or not, that definition or that mindset towards meditation did not enter the United States until the 1950s and 60s. Bill is writing in 1939. So at that point, meditation meant something entirely different. And what it means is it means to ponder or reflect upon. It simply means we sit and we reflect upon our relationship with our higher power. That's it. It's so much simpler than what we tend to make it. So we pray only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. And then 12, having had a spiritual awakening. As the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. And I took the definition, rather than go to the dictionary, I went to the appendix, which gives us a very good definition of spiritual awakening, and that is the personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism. So rather than go on, I'm going to leave it there because I think I threw a lot of stuff out there. There are some questions for reflection in the chat. I'm not going to get into those now. I mean, they're there. You can definitely use us for a prompt or talk about them. In addition, you can also look in the chat because there are links to articles that give insight into Bill's writing of the 12 steps and when he did that, and even a Grapevine article that Bill himself wrote. So that's all there, and that, of course, will be in the video as well, in the notes for the video. So with that, I'd like to open it up